Hi, Roy here. Welcome back to my channel, Roy Reads Anything. Anything including Victorian bestsellers of the past. So, it's Garbaugust, a month of reading trashy books as convened by Criminoli. All the details down below. And one thing I thought would be interesting would be to read some older stuff. So my first Garbaugust book is The Sorrows of Satan by Marie Corelli, which was brilliant. So this book came out in 1895. The full title is The Sorrows of Satan, or The Strange Experience of One Geoffrey Tempest, Millionaire, a Romance, by Marie Corelli. And the story goes roughly like this. So, here's what happens. Narrated in the first person by this Geoffrey Tempest. First line, do you know what it is to be poor? So, this guy is an author, an unsuccessful author, can't place anything anywhere, lost his journalism job, and he's, basically got zero money. And says a bit about that and sort of his views on the sort of literary society that rejects him. But then the post comes, 3 letters. So the first one, he'd written to a mate of his basically asking, can you lend me £40? Expecting to be given the bum's rush, but no, he's got a letter from his friend saying, here's a draft for £40. So great, immediate problem solved. He'll be able to pay his rent. This is good news. And goes on to say that he's recommending that a friend of his comes to visit him. This friend's been really helpful. His name is Prince Rimenez. Second letter, it's from some solicitors saying, you've unexpected death of a unknown relative, you've inherited £5 million. So he's now spectacularly wealthy, beyond, inhumanly wealthy, one of the wealthiest men in the country, which is just like, oh my God, can fate really do this kind of thing? So he's now thinking, this friend of the friend of the friend who lent me the £40, don't want to bother seeing the likes of him. But he comes round anyway, and he meets him, and he's very charming. And basically, although he apparently is far more wealthy than a mere £5 million himself, he can help him out with connections and introductions. So he falls in with this chap, Lucio Rimenez. So you pretty much get the idea. We as the readers pretty much know that this guy is the devil, and therefore it's a Faust type story, and that Geoffrey Tempest is gonna suffer the consequences at some point, although he himself misses all his clues all along for most of the book. So yes, so you get this build up. He's successful. He gets lots of things to happen that he'd want to happen. He is not a great person. He doesn't want to help the poor. He's vengeful against people who've wronged him in the past. He's terribly snobbish, and in the end, he stops all his writing, because why bother with that, except he pays for his book to be published. So that's the sort of setup. So you know what's going to happen, and it's good. I enjoyed it. It kind of goes on a bit. It goes over the same territory, maybe a few more times than it needs to. So Marie Corelli, superstar author of the times. Pretty much anybody you can think of, she outsold them, and it has been said that she was the best-selling author for a few years in the Victorian period. The public, therefore, loved her. Not so critics, who hated her, and earlier editions of this book came with a note at the beginning saying it was not to be given to critics. They were not to get any free reader copies. They would have to buy it like everybody else. And Marie Corelli, by now, from the vantage point of considerable success, she's sticking it to critics all throughout this. Other people in the firing line, new women, the feminists of the time, they're getting the getting given the sort of Marie Corelli treatment. And other literature. So interestingly, this is not, despite the title, this is not transgressive literature full of racy material. Though it sort of sounds that way, you know, and it was denounced from the pulpit. A clergyman said it should be sent back to the sewer from whence it came, as well as the sort of literary critics not liking it. But Marie Corelli's stance is one of traditional conservative moralism, you know. So this is like, well, she was called the icon of suburbia. So this is sort of like, you know, yeah, those sexual novels, terrible evil. If I read you what one of the characters says about the influence that they've had on her, this is sort of, I guess, another kind of trashy literature of the era. At any rate, she went on, her eyes darkening with the intensity of her feeling, you have not polluted your pen with the vileness common to many of the authors of the day. I ask you, do you think a girl can read the books that are now freely published, and that her silly society friends tell her to read because it is so dreadfully queer, and yet remain unspoilt and innocent? Books that go into the details of the lives of outcasts, that explain and analyse the secret vices of men, that advocate, almost as a sacred duty, free love and universal polygamy, that see no shame in introducing into the circles of good wives and pure-minded girls a heroine who boldly seeks out a man, any man, in order that she may have a child by him without the degradation of marrying him. I have read all those books. What can you expect of me? Not innocent, surely. I despise men, I despise my own sex, I loathe myself for being a woman. So, so yes, she's not of that order. There's a later scene where, remember, the devil, Lucio, is, he organises the entertainments for the millionaire's wedding to the woman who's just been speaking, which include a series of tableaux vivants, these sort of curtain parts, and there's people in costume making an elaborate sort of scene. And there's a variety of these. Now, remember, he is the devil. He's done all this in secret, and all of a sudden there's like hundreds of performers. It's like, where did these people come from? How are they going to eat? How are they going to get the train? Don't worry about it. So they are both incredibly elaborate and spectacular and slightly unsettling to the hundreds of the great and the good who've assembled for the wedding. So there's various of these things appear. And then you get one called Seeds of Corruption, was the next picture, and showed us a young and beautiful girl in her early teens lying on a luxurious couch en déshabillé with a novel in her hand, of which the title was plainly seen by all, a novel known by everyone present, and the work of a much praised living author. Round her on the floor, and cast carelessly on a chair at her side, were other novels of the same sexual type, all their titles turned towards us, and the names of their authors equally made manifest, which sounds a bit like a thumbnail for a Garbaugust booktube video. So all of that condemned in this kind of moral tale, and also, like I say, the new women, the feminists are, the blue stockings are criticised. You could almost imagine blue stockings being given the same treatment as we saw in the 70s with skinhead girls and knuckle girls and the kind of scary women of our era. Blue stockings could be done like that. So what else happens? Well, I won't spoil it for you. I'd say it's worth reading. Like I say, I do think it goes around the houses a little bit. Another thing she does, I mean, again, this is seems so spectacularly naive and kind of, I'm Marie Corelli, I can do whatever I want. She inserts a character called Mavis Clare, MC, like herself, who's another author, who is super idealised. She's like the only writer who writes anything worth writing, and she's also super popular and hated by the critics. In fact, she keeps pigeons, each one named after one of the people who slated her in the press, which she laughs off for being having.
And does she bake the pigeons in a pie and eat them?
No, she wouldn't. She wouldn't need to. She's happy just to be amused by them. So this kind of self-aggrandisement, it's quite funny, really. What else? What else can I tell you? I mean, it's very melodramatic. The prose is, again, it's another reason why your sophisticated critics wouldn't be so keen on it, whereas writers were lapping it up. Readers lapping it up. And again, her popularity was off the scale. You know, not just huge sales, not just suburbanites liking her, but other people who weren't the intelligentsia, royalty. She even had a telegram from Queen Victoria herself saying that she wanted every Marie Corelli novel to be sent to her as soon as it was published, which she, Corelli, would carry that telegram around with her like a little talisman. So that's kind of awesome. And in America, there was a serious plan to build a city named after her in Colorado.
Oh my God.
So, yeah.
What are they going to call it? Maryville or Corelliville?
Corelli City.
Corelli City?
Yeah.
Cool.
There was a prospectus issued. So yeah, it's the real supernatural devil, which I've always wondered, is it about like a villain, or is the Satan thing just a metaphor? But no, it's your proper Satan. Hard not to imagine him as the Tom Ellis character from the Lucifer TV series. And he's a bit like that. He's, as a characterisation of the devil, he's more than just evil. He is very much the fallen angel, and he's very much the condemner of mankind. In fact, in this, he'll be allowed back into heaven once everyone has shunned him. So he's got an interesting sort of motivation, and he does there's some quite nice gothic touches. So like Lucio has as a pet a strange living beetle type creature with bejeweled eyes and whatnot, that he found alive in the body cavity of a mummified princess. So
You ain't got one in that book you dug back up out of the garden.
Oh well, yes, if you want to see books with insects emerging for them, I refer you to one of my earlier videos.
Yeah, but don't watch it while you're eating your dinner, tea, lunch, or breakfast, or brunch.
But I can't do as well as
or second breakfast.
Can't do as well as a mummy unwrapping, revealing a living beetle. Very Victorian thing to happen. So that was my first Garbaugust book. So where does that get me? So it's a book in the Anything Goes week. That's the first dimension. In the second dimension, which is the bingo card, well, it hasn't really got any of these prompts apart from being written under a pseudonym. So I'm going to mark off written under a pseudonym. There'll be others, but that sort of counts. And in terms of the decades, the third dimension, we're way back in the pre-1910, so that's one book in the earliest layer. So the train has left the station. Hooray! Okay, back soon with something else.